What's up, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 192 of the Lone Gunman Podcast, and I am your host, Rob Clark, here with you on this beautifully cold Christmas day. Merry Christmas to all. Thank you for hanging with the show. Thank you for listening. I don't expect you to be listening today. I mean, you've got better things to do on Christmas Day. Spend time with your family. Reflect on the past year. Be thankful for what you have. But I wanted to get this out, as I do on most special occasions, just as a special thank you to all my friends and listeners and supporters who've been with me over the past, almost 8 years now. It's crazy. And speaking of milestones, I want to thank everybody immensely. This podcast, who'd have thought? This podcast, this narrowly focused podcast, has reached a milestone of 500,000 downloads on Spreaker. That's right, you heard me right. 500,000, 500,000 downloads on Spreaker. So from the bottom of my heart, to all of you out there, I just want to thank you. You make doing this definitely worthwhile. And to all the people out there who reach out to me on social media, on Messenger, through email, and have become friends of the show, friends of mine, if I've touched you in some special way, not in a creepy pedophile way, but if I've touched your soul, your heart, your mind, and sparked an interest in you that you didn't have before about this case, then I'm doing my job correctly. The only way that this is ever going to get solved is if more eyes and more minds get sucked into the vortex and try to come up with the truth. I mean, this is a gigantic 1,000,000-piece puzzle. And it's going to take a coordinated effort and some thinking outside the box and some connecting of the dots to really, really get to the bottom of what happened, who was involved, who was behind it, and the why surrounding the murder of John F. Kennedy on November the 22nd, 1963. And for those of you who choose to listen or watch on YouTube, I just want to say a special thank you. Pardon me. I had 21 new subscribers last month. Almost 5,000 views, 146,800. Wait a minute. Let me try that again. Yeah, 146.8 thousand minutes listened to in 1 month. So that's crazy. And the Spreaker statistics don't even include any of the YouTube statistics. So, it might be 500,000 downloads on there, but with all the YouTube stuff, man, it's crazy to think that how many people that this show touches, and not in a creepy way, you pervs. Okay, so as you may know from the title of this show, Steering Truth, you hopefully have figured out what this episode is about. And that is the book that was released early last year by Buell Wesley Frazier of the same name. Now, for the benefit of those who may have missed a comment in passing many shows ago, let me refresh your memories. As I've said many times on this show and on Quick Hits, the other assassination show that I do with my buddy Doug Campbell of the Dallas Action. And if you're not listening to that yet, what in the hell are you doing? You thought this show was good? That show is the best JFK assassination related podcast on the entire World Wide Web, hands down. It's amazing. So if you love what Doug does, if you love what I do, you're really going to love us together. So check it out. It's called Quick Hits. You can listen to it wherever you're listening to this show. Just search for it, subscribe to it, and enjoy. Where was I? Oh, yes. You've probably heard me say many times on this show how I always thought, you know, that if you are a researcher or an author in the Kennedy assassination field, and you would like for people to actually read your book or pay attention to your research, if you have done some good things, I've got many, many, many examples of these folks that have reached out to me, and I've gotten on my show, and we've gotten out there, and many, many good things have happened because of it. I mean, look at Bart Camp, for instance. His research is amazing. I hooked up with him early on in the early years of this show, and I've had him on many times on this show and on Quick Hits. And it's always great. He's done some great work on the case with the second floor lunchroom encounter, the prayer man stuff, the interrogations, the notes, and all of the stuff that he's doing over at Dealey Plaza, UK with the Bart Camp, Malcolm Blunt archives. That's a Herculean effort doing what he's doing, getting all that stuff uploaded and digitized and accessible to researchers around the world for posterity. I've had several authors on my show. Here's the thing. If I took all that time researching and writing and publishing a book on the Kennedy assassination, and I actually wanted people to read it and, try to make some money off of it, then I might reach out to some of the more popular Kennedy assassination related shows. My audience is a built-in audience for your books, people. It really is not rocket science, you know. Um, and I've been more than happy to share my statistics with anybody who would ask, "Are you legit? Do you really have 500,000 downloads?" I mean, do the math. Between that and YouTube, you're looking at 5, 6, 700,000 listens. I only have 192 episodes out there of this show. So divide 700,000 by 192, and you can figure out relatively quickly what the rough estimate is of listeners per episode. Now, I'm not tooting my own horn here by any means. I'm just letting you know that my audience is legit. I reach a lot of people that care about this show. Well, no, not this show, but they care about this subject. I mean, I don't talk about anything else on the Lone Gunman podcast other than the Kennedy assassination. I kind of pigeonholed myself, unfortunately, many, many moons ago. So it's not like I can start talking about, flat earth and all this other crazy shit on here if I really wanted to, because that's not the title of the show. The show is the Lone Gunman podcast. Now, sure, I could maybe branch off into the RFK assassination. It kind of fits, But again, I've pretty much pigeonholed myself into this subject. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I don't know. Like I said, if I had gone through all the trouble and time and sweat and tears of writing a book, I would want to get it out there. I would want to sell it. I would want as many eyes on it as possible by people who actually care about it. Therefore, I would reach out and promote myself as many places as I could But I wouldn't waste my time going on, you know, the Bob and Ted breakfast show. You know what I mean? Because the audience for these guys is sports. They don't give two shits about the Kennedy assassination. You're just a novelty in their eyes. Now, I just don't get it. Now, that's not to say that your boy does not reach out every once in a while to folks that I really, really want to talk to. Because I've done this in the past. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes I get burned. Sometimes I get ignored. Sometimes I get cussed. Sometimes I get the runaround. It is what it is in this business. But, so, as you know, if you are a listener to this show, if you're not, please go back in the archives and listen up, because I've done several shows about Buell Frazier in the past and how I think he has been lying for a lot of these years. I've pointed out the many inconsistencies in his story, the many evolutions and changes in his story. Not to mention just about all of his co-workers at the school book depository uh, contradicting a lot of what he said in written testimony and even orally. I mean, you can go back and you can listen to yourself straight from the horse's mouth, and you can hear one of Buell Wesley Frazier's co-workers plainly state that he brought Oswald to work every day. And he used to park right in the back on the bend of Houston Street, and they'd come in the back door every day. Every day is what he said. Edward Shields, co-worker, he worked down at the building where a lot of the workers would park their cars. Said Frazier would bring Oswald to work all the time. And the morning of the assassination, he didn't see Oswald with him when Frazier parked. And in fact, another co-worker had even asked him, "Hey, where's your rider?" To which Frazier replied, "I dropped him off at the building." Okay? So I'm not going to rehash all of that for you. If you'd like to go back and listen to the several hour long shows that I've done about Frasier, feel free to go back and listen. Now, the points that I've brought up are valid points. They are in the record. I'm not just making shit up, folks. This is HSCA testimony. This is oral testimony from firsthand eyewitnesses like Roy Lewis, who was there. And this stuff can't be ignored, and it needs to be addressed. So I had high hopes for Buell Wesley Frazier's book. I had heard he was writing one, and spent many years anticipating the release. Well, early this year, I think it was back in February, it was finally released. So I hopped on Amazon and I immediately scoured up a copy. And there it sat on my nightstand until about a week ago. So you might be asking me, why, Rob, you wanted this book for so long? What the hell did you do just leaving it on the nightstand so long? Well, I had the air taken out of my sails because I reached out to Buell Frazier himself in Messenger on Facebook when this book came out. And this is what I said. "Hello, Mr. Frazier. My name is Rob Clark, host of the Lone Gunman podcast. a show currently at 178 episodes, all about different aspects of the assassination. To date, 343,000 downloads, averaging 10,000 listens a month. I tell you this not to toot my horn, but to encourage you to join me for a chat about your book. If you want to reach the audience you are aiming for to buy your book, this is the show you want to come on to promote it. I've been researching the case for 30 years. I know the case front to back, and I think we could have a great conversation about it. Let me know if you're interested and we could set something up. Thank you for the consideration. He responded, "Hi, Rob. Can you please reach out to my son, also named Rob? He coordinates things like this for me. His number is blah, blah, blah." Sure thing. Thank you, and hopefully talk to you soon. Well, I reached out to no answer. So, it is what it is. If you don't care, you don't care. I'm not begging you to come on the show. I can do this with or without you. It really doesn't matter. Um, so, let's dive right into it, shall we? Steering Truth by Buell Wesley Frazier. Now, for a moment, just imagine a world in which the Kennedy assassination never happened. Now, in that world, many different possibilities and outcomes can be thought upon. But in the life of people that the Kennedy assassination had a direct and devastating impact on, think about how different their lives would have been had the Kennedy assassination never happened. For instance, let's think about Buell Frazier for a second. Okay? This guy was nobody special. And if you read his book, he tells about his early life growing up and how things weren't the greatest around the house. He had a kind of a love-hate relationship with his stepfather. He didn't really know his real father until much, much later in life. And he followed quickly in the footsteps of his older sisters, getting the hell out of the house as soon as possible. His older sister, Lenny Mae Randall, got out first, married. I think his younger sister married at 15 and left. And I believe he left at 17. Grew up in Huntsville, Texas, and not much going on there. He worked several crappy jobs. So he figured that he would move to Dallas and live with his sister and her family and, try to better himself, in a bigger city with the possibility of, being able to make more money and having more opportunities in general in life than being stuck in a small one-horse town in a horrible environment. So, like I said, just imagine for a second that the Kennedy assassination never happened. What are the chances that we would even know who in the hell Buell Wesley Frazier is or ever was? Probably slim to none. Unless you grew up with him, were friends with him, or related to him. Most people live a mostly autonomous, what's the word I'm looking for? Fame-free life. Where they're not thrust into the spotlight for good or bad reasons. Um, you know, unless he was a serial killer or, you know, saved somebody's life or, you know, single handedly took down a Mexican drug cartel. Who the hell knows? But unless he did something really, really amazing or really, really horrible, chances are we would not know who in the hell Buell Wesley Frazier is or ever was. His claim to fame is that he happened to work in the same building that Oswald worked, and that he would give Oswald a ride to work occasionally, according to him, uh, most days, if not every day, by his coworkers. But we're not going to argue that here. Um, so we get to the age of 19. Frazier moves in with his sister. He goes to an employment agency in Irving, Texas, where he is informed about a position at the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas. Now, at this time, Frazier does have a car. He managed to save up enough money to buy an old 54 Chevy, and driving to work was not a problem. So he went down, talked to Roy Truly, put in his application, and he was asked to start working the same day. Come back after lunch and we'll start you right up, boy. All right, sir, no problem. So the story goes, of course, Ruth Payne lived in the same neighborhood as Lenny Mae Randall and her husband Bill and their kids. And Marina, Lee's pregnant wife, uh, was living with Ruth at the time. And of course, these ladies of the neighborhood would get together and have coffee or tea or, fold laundry and gossip and chat about, whatever's going on while their husbands are off working. And, Ruth happened to mention that this Marina's husband was looking for work. And Lenny Mae said, "Oh, well, my brother just got a job down at the school book depository. Maybe he can go down there and see." So I believe Ruth Payne called down, spoke to Roy Truly, and he said, "Yep, send him on down." And the rest is history, as they say. She told Oswald about the job, and down he went, talked to Roy Truly, and he was pretty much hired on the spot. So, in the book, Steering Truth, Frazier takes us on it's not even really a journey, but the process of, him first meeting Lee Oswald. I believe they were introduced by Bill Shelley. He said, "Hey, this is Lee. He's going to be an order taker like you. Just teach him everything you know." Because Frazier had only been there for a month at that point, and caught on fairly quickly. I mean, it's not a job for a rocket scientist. You just need to hold the right books, remember where things was, and make sure your orders were correct. And that's really about it. So Frazier goes on about his business. He said, he was teaching Lee everything. He caught on pretty quick. Didn't really say a whole lot, but again, they didn't really have too much time to talk because they were so busy, pulling all these boxes and orders. But you and I both know, folks, we've all been in working environments with new coworkers, and especially if you're doing menial manual labor, you always find something to talk about. You don't just, I mean, it's awkward silence just to not speak to the other person. I mean, it's just downright uncomfortable. You'd probably ask them, "Hey, where are you from? You been in the military? You got any kids?" Just general stuff, I mean, and look, at this point, like I've said, Oswald is 24 years old. He's lived in Russia for 2.5 years. He's been in the Marines. He's been to Japan. He's been to Helsinki. He's been to England. He's been to Mexico. you know, he's been all over the place. He has a Russian wife. He has a kid and another kid on the way. Frazier would have been fascinated with this dude's life. I mean, this Frazier hadn't been outside Texas yet, let alone let alone America. Had been able to see the sights, or been overseas, or been on a ship, or been on a plane. Nothing. The first time Frazier was on an airplane, he states in the book, was when they flew him to uh, Washington to testify before the Warren Commission. That was the first time Frazier had ever been on a plane. So you got this country bumpkin from bumfuck Texas, you know, all of a sudden he's saddled up with world traveler, former Marine Lee Oswald, with a Russian wife and baby, and another one on the way, and has led this pretty crazy life, for the first, 6 or 7 years. I think they would have certainly had a lot to talk about. And Fraser seems like the type that would ask a lot of questions. He seems pretty intuitive. But we'll get back to that. So in the book, Steering Truth, he goes into a lot about his personal life, about growing up and him meeting his wife and um, him getting drafted in the Army. Because I believe he worked at the depository until 1965, until he received his draft notice. And I believe he went in for 2 or 3 years, got out, and then re-enlisted in the early 70s. And then I believe stayed in another 10 or 11 years at that point. And then was supposed to be shipped off and stationed in Italy, um, but he could not take his wife for the first year that he was going. So around that time, his marriage was ending. He didn't want to go to Italy by himself, so he got out of the armed forces again and proceeded to start his civilian life as a delivery driver for a beverage company. And that's where he met his second wife and had another kid. And then, the 80s and 90s and up to now has happened. So, all in all, would we know who the hell Buell Frazier is had the Kennedy assassination never happened? No. The majority of this book is about his life in general outside of the Kennedy assassination. And I'm not saying that nobody cares or I don't care about any of that. I mean, that's more like it'd be valuable to his family, to have this book. It's the story of his life. But outside the Kennedy assassination, he really doesn't matter in the big scheme of things. I mean, let's face it, his claim to fame is the Kennedy assassination, period. Being associated with Lee Oswald and taking him to work that day, that's it. That's it. Outside of that, nobody cares about your life, Buell Frazier. Um, and the majority of this book was that. You know, I get you're a big baseball fan. You used to like to go to Rangers games. You were the little league coach, and this and that. Some things did glean from the book, as he became really really good friends with Billy Lovelady, and actually got a job in a pipe company, I believe it was, when he got out the first time. And Lovelady was actually working there. So they kind of reconnected, and him and his wife and Billy Lovelady and his wife used to hang out a lot, and they were friendly with each other until um, Lovelady moved away to Colorado for this pipe company to open up a branch office out there. And actually, Lovelady would end up dying of a heart attack in his early 40s. I believe it was in the late 70s, 78 or 79. Um, and he had actually asked Frasier to come out there with him, and help him start up this branch of this pipe business out there. And Frasier told him no at the time, and then ended up re-enlisting in the army. So there's a lot of strange synchronous events that could have changed the course of his life and all that jazz. But let's go back, because Frasier does cover some things in the book related to the assassination. So let's see what he says about some certain things. Um, I only wish that he would elaborate more. I mean, it's very matter of factly stated, very generalized, and it's stuff we've all heard before, folks. So, of course, Frasier talks about um, that day, what happened that day about Oswald coming to his house early in the morning. Frasier was running a little late, and asked Oswald if he wanted to come in for a cup of coffee. He said, "No, I'll wait out here." So Frasier finished his coffee, brushed his teeth, and then went out and got in the car. They set off for the school book depository. Frasier noticed there was a package on the back seat, to which Oswald allegedly said, "Oh, remember, curtain rods? Oh, yeah, yeah, okay." So they drive into Dallas, park the car. Frasier stays behind to rev his battery up, to charge his battery so his car starts at the end of the day. Oswald gets out, grabs the package, tucks it up under his armpit, and walks ahead of Frasier to the school book depository. Now, this account is directly refuted by two other eyewitnesses who were co-workers, Edward Shields, and I believe it was Charles Gibbons, who, of course, asked Frasier where his rider was, to which Frasier supposedly said, "I dropped him off at the building," you know. And Shields said he saw this exchange as he stood outside there smoking a cigarette outside the building by the parking lot. So, but again, let's not split hairs and get into whether or not Frasier was lying or not. We'll just stick with whatever he says his story was and what he says that happened that day. So, they both got in there. I guess by this point, Oswald had been working there for a month and a half. So he wasn't in need of constant supervision or training anymore. He was pretty much on his own, doing a good job. According to Givens, who was their order checker. And according to Frasier, on November the 22nd, 1963, he was out on the front steps with his supervisor, Bill Shelley, and several other co-workers watching the presidential parade. And they were out there. They heard 3 shots. And what he says is that Billy Lovelady, and Bill Shelley started walking down towards the grassy knoll area to the rail yard. Frasier just stood there on the steps and took in the chaos for a minute, and then figured, well, it might be a good idea to try to, catch up with Bill Lovelady and Bill Shelley and see what the hell is going on. So he says he tried to make his way down the sidewalk. He said he got about 20 feet down there, and there was just way too many people, way too much chaos, and there was no way he was going to catch up with him. So he just turned back around and realized that he hadn't ate lunch yet. So he went back in the building, went down to the basement, and ate his lunch. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're out on the front steps. You just watched the presidential motorcade go by, and you heard rifle shots. You heard people exclaim, "The president's been shot." Utter chaos is going on outside, and you go back in the building to the basement and eat your lunch. Okay. Whatever's clever. Problem with this statement, of course, is the whole Victoria Adams testimony that states that she saw Billy Lovelady and Bill Shelley inside the school book depository as she was coming down the rear stairs. They were standing back by the freight elevator by the Houston Street dock. So we know Victoria Adams' testimony was changed or had to be changed because they can't be in two places at once. Billy Lovelady and Bill Shelley both changed their stories. So who knows what the real story is here? I don't know if Frasier's in on this lie or what's going on. But anyway, I digress. Now, for following the prayer man thesis, the prayer man was Oswald. Couldn't have been Billy Lovelady because he's actually in the same photo as Billy Lovelady when Lovelady was still on the steps. So, going by that thesis, Oswald, in his own words, as his own alibi, in Fritz's notes and Bookout's notes and Hostie's notes now, has stated that Oswald said that he was out front with Bill Shelley watching the presidential parade. So if Prayer Man was Oswald, that would mean that shortly after the assassination, Oswald would have went back into the building at some point because nobody saw him come out. He would have been behind everybody else. There's like a breezeway. There used to be like a glass door there with a little vestibule. And he could have easily come out behind everybody else and just stood there silently and watched everything go down. Heard the shots and like, oh shit, it's going down, and then went back in the building. Because I came across this account from Marion Baker, and I don't know what it's from. It was obviously given years, or if not months or years after November the 22nd, 1963. Because I looked through all his earlier statements, and then they don't mention this, but it says this. So, in my own mind, they probably came from the corner building as the sound was right and because of the pigeons flying off the roof. So I headed there, I got off my motor and entered the building. It took a while because of the crowd. They had started moving in every direction. The man who said he was the building superintendent was outside and met me at the door and went in with me. Shortly after I entered the building, I confronted Oswald. The man who identified himself as the superintendent, that would be Roy Truly, said that Oswald was all right, that he was employed there. So we left Oswald there, and the supervisor showed me the way upstairs. We couldn't get anyone to send the freight elevator down to get us. In giving the place a quick check, I found nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. So I started back to see what had happened. Not knowing for sure what had happened, I was limited in what I could legally do inside the building. The investigator from Washington contacted me for my recollection of what happened, but I guess they weren't interested in what I said. This is from Marion Baker. So for those of you not paying attention, shortly after I entered the building, I confronted Oswald. The man who identified himself as the superintendent said that Oswald was all right, that he was employed there. We left Oswald there, and the supervisor showed me the way upstairs. We couldn't get anyone to send the freight elevator down. Okay? This is indicating that all of this shit took place on the first floor of the school book depository, not the second floor lunchroom, folks. So, if Oswald was on the first floor and Lovelady and Shelley were seen in the back by the freight elevators as Victoria Adams came down the stairs, to which she came down relatively quickly after the shots, her and Sandra Stiles, that means that Oswald could not have been on the sixth floor of the book depository shooting that rifle. That right there pretty much ends that argument. Now, back to Frasier. And I'm not saying Frasier is a horrible person, but this book could have been, so much more. So back to his book, he doesn't go into much more detail than the quote official story that he's given over the years. He states that, of course, after the assassination and after going downstairs and as he was eating his lunch in the basement, he says an officer came down and asked him what he was doing. He said, "I'm just eating lunch," and the officer went back upstairs. And then when Frasier went back upstairs, Bill Shelley pretty much told him they were done working for the day. So at around 1:15, 1:30, they were dismissed. And Frasier decided it would be a good time to go visit his stepfather, who he had a love-hate relationship with, at the Irving Professional Center, which was a hospital in Irving where his stepdad was staying following a heart attack or some kind of episode. Apparently, somehow, Lenny Mae, his sister, knew where to find him. So don't know if he talked to her in the interim, or he called her from there and let her know what had happened and what was going on and where he was. I don't know. But I have in here in my hot little hand the Irving Police Department arrest record of Buell Wesley Frazier. And it has times on here. So it says on here, Detective Rose, or I'm sorry, at 5:20, the reporting officer received a telephone call from Dallas Police Homicide Detective Gus Rose. Detective Rose advised the reporting officer that he had information that a Buell Wesley Frazier was believed to be visiting with a Mr. David Williams in room number 30 at the Irving Professional Center. Detective Rose explained that he had information that Frazier was involved in the assassination of President Kennedy in Dallas. Detective Rose requested that I go to the location, determine if Frazier were there, and if so, hold Frazier in custody and advise him. So A minute later, the reporting officer and Captain McCarley went to the Irving Professional Center and contacted Nurse Fidel and confirmed that there was a visitor in room number 30 with Mr. Williams. The reporting officer has Nurse Fidel go into room number 30 and ask if Mr. Frazier was there, and if so, there was a telephone call out at the desk for him. Wesley Frazier walked out of the door, and the reporting officer identified myself with my badge, and then Captain McCarley and the reporting officer walked Frazier down the hall a short ways and into a doorway where we searched him and had him produce identification, which showed that he was, in fact, Buell Wesley Frazier. At 5:35, Captain McCarley and the reporting officer brought Frazier to the Irving Police Department, where we contacted Detective Rose and advised him we had Frazier in custody. Detective Rose and Stovall came to the Irving Police Department and interviewed Frazier briefly, and then both detectives and the reporting officer went to Frazier's car, which was still parked at the professional center, but nothing was found in the vehicle. Detectives Rose and Stovall and the reporting officer then went to Frazier's home. Frazier produced a .303 caliber British Enfield rifle from the closet in the living room and turned the rifle over to Detective Rose along with the clip for the rifle. Rose and Stovall then took Frazier to Dallas for questioning. At 12:30 a.m. on 11/23/63, the reporting officer contacted Detective Rose, and he advised that Frazier had been run on the polygraph and cleared of the offense, but furnished valuable information concerning Oswald. Frazier was then released by the Dallas PD. So, there you have those events. So, if Frazier is leaving the book depository by 1:30, 2 o'clock, he spends an awfully lot of time with a guy he doesn't like very much, but whom he probably respects. His opinion about things. So, what do you talk about for 3 hours? Visiting a guy you don't like very much. I don't know. Because in his book, Steering Truth, Frazier, he talks a lot about his experience being arrested. He stated that he was booked, taken mug shot, fingerprinted, lie detector test, none of which we have in the record, by the way. Not just the lie detector test results. We don't have those. We don't have his mug shot. We don't have his booking slip. We don't have his mug shot or his fingerprints. We don't have a copy of the confession that Fritz asked him to sign. None of that. So, do we know Frazier passed the polygraph? No. They said he did, but without the actual test results and the questions that were asked of him, which again, he does not state what those questions were in his book. We don't have the mug shot. We don't have fingerprints. We don't have, any of that. We don't have a copy of the confession he was asked to sign by Fritz. So did it happen? I mean, you're really going to tell the homicide detective that comes in the room and tells you to sign this paper that you're going to fight him if he threatens to hit you? I mean, come on now. You're a 19-year-old kid from bumfuck Texas, scared shitless. Fritz rears back to sock you one, and you tell him it's gonna be the last thing he does. If he does it, it's gonna be on like a neck bone. And then and then Fritz backs down. Come on, come on, man. I mean, it all sounds like a real good story, but one that wasn't told, of course, until after Fritz died, and nobody's there to refute it. Come on, man. He tells of his experience, going to DC with his sister and several of the his black coworkers, that were on the fifth floor at the time of the assassination, and they got to stay in this big fancy hotel in DC and eat this good food, and got to meet members of the Warren Commission. And he said, as he gave his testimony, he said that several of the members that were there to hear his testimony uh, blatantly fell asleep when he was telling them his story. I think he said Alan Dulles got up and left the room at one point, um, and that Gerald Ford was the only nice one there. And he came over and just made sure that he talked to him and make sure he was having a good trip, and if he needed anything, and made sure he was being taken care of. Said that he appreciated that. And then he goes into his experience at the Clay Shaw trial, and having to go to New Orleans and answer questions, for Jim Garrison's investigation into Clay Shaw. But that's pretty much it. I mean, he includes the Warren Commission testimony, his entire Warren Commission testimony in book form, in the appendix of his book, as he does his Garrison trial, Clay Shaw trial testimony is in the book as well, in the appendix. So while the book itself might be 200-300 pages long, half of it is Warren Commission and trial transcripts at the end of the book. The book itself might be 150 pages. I ended up reading it in 2 days after it sat on my nightstand for 10 months. So it's not a hard read. From what it says in there, his son pretty much wrote the book based on, Frazier orally telling him what to write. There was some written testimonies included in the book at various points and places. A lot of it was from Frazier's family, statements from his sisters or his ex-wife, son, things of this nature that have little anecdotes about certain points in his life that were important to him. The one thing he does not go into is the Hsca investigation. It is not mentioned once in this book, folks. Not once. He talks about, taking advantage of the mock trial in the early 80s, getting a free trip to England out of the deal for a week or two for his family in exchange for doing that. But he doesn't mention the Hsca investigation at all. Now, what I found out about that, it was at this point in Frazier's life that he had re-enlisted in the Army. And at this point, he was back in for 7 or 8 years, stationed at Fort Hood in Texas. We have the investigator notes available online. Anybody can go see them. When they were trying to find Frazier and trying to talk to Frazier, the notes are out there. Very evasive. Canceled again. Won't talk to us without his lawyer present. Not sure why, but, being very evasive. Doesn't want to talk. Rescheduled. So he puts it off and he puts it off and he puts it off. Finally, they get him. And there are 4 tapes. Each of them about an hour or so long. And out of the 4 tapes, maybe 2 of them are easily listenable. The other 2, not so much. Time has not been very kind to them, but you can make out vaguely what is being said in the 4 tapes. Now, these 4 audio tapes are online in many places and can be listened to and downloaded from the archives. People have gotten them from the archives, I should say. And in a couple places, they've been transcribed. In fact, former guest and author Richard Gilbride managed to transcribe 2 out of the 4 tapes and put them online. And some very interesting things and some very nonsensical things, of course, came through in the transcription of these tapes. And one of the things that stood out to me, and I've said it on the show before, is that there is a quote from Frasier that says, "I knew he had the rifle. I knew it, and I stood right there on the steps, and I thought, oh my God, I don't want to get dragged into this." Now, of course, if you're transcribing something like that, it could be taken as, I knew he hid the rifle, I knew he had the rifle. But it's pretty clear when he's saying, I'm standing out on the front steps and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I don't want to get dragged into this. So apparently, he told the Hsca investigators something that he had never said before to anybody about anything. Why would he say that? Unless he was done. I mean, at this point in his life, he's going through a divorce. He wants out of the Army, or he wants to make it in the Army. One or the other. So he's not in a good place in life at this point. He's already been dragged through the drama of November the 22nd, 1963, the Warren Commission investigation, the FBI investigation, the Jim Garrison investigation, and now the House Select Committee on Assassinations is reopening the case. They're taking another look at things. And by this point, Frasier's had about enough. So maybe at this point, he's thinking, I can finally be able to tell the truth. I just want to be done with this. I've always said there's a reason Frasier doesn't talk about the Hsca investigation. And I think it's awfully convenient that 2 out of those 4 tapes aren't listenable. The Hsca investigation was going into some very interesting places before it got shut down. And a lot of these leads were not able to be pursued for one reason or another. So a lot of these Dallas leads got shut down. A lot of these New Orleans leads got shut down. They went with the easy, the low-hanging fruit. Oh, the mafia did it at the very last second. Oh, we got audio from a Dicta Belt. There's definitely a shot from the grassy knoll, So we can't say Oswald wasn't the lone assassin anymore. At the very least, he had an accomplice. Blah, blah, blah. Mafia did it. So the package, he was always specific about Oswald's, or saying that Oswald, when he got out of the car, stuck this thing up in his armpit and kind of carried it into the building that way. Now, look, folks, if you have a package, as Frasier stated, he is never stated that the package was anywhere close to being able to hold a rifle. At best, it was 2.5 feet, 24 to 28 inches. 28 inches is the best estimate that I can give for what Frasier says the package was. Okay? 28 inches. That's a little more than 2 feet. So if you stick a yardstick up in your armpit, chances are it's going to fit in there nicely, and you'll be able to cup it in your hand and have your hand at your side, no problem. Now try to do that with a 28-inch package. Doesn't work very well, unless you got some really short-ass arms. And again, anybody that has just a package of curtain rods is not going to carry it up in their armpit. You're going to hold on to it with your hand and carry it like a fucking human being. Now, just because Oswald, if he took a rifle into the building, doesn't mean he was up there on the 6th floor shooting. The rifle found belonged to A.J. Heidel, Fair Play for Cuba Committee member, New Orleans chapter. Okay? It was ordered in that name. So if it was found in the building and tied back through one way or the other, if, think the FBI wasn't very smart, they would have tracked the serial number back to the point of origin of sale, seen who bought it. A.J. Heidel, who's this guy? New Orleans perk up. Oh, we've got that guy on our radar. We arrested some guy. We found that name on handbills. Fair Play for Cuba, a Castro supporter, communist, commie lover. That's who's taking the pot shots at the president. So, like I've always said, maybe Oswald did take that rifle into the building and plant it on the 6th floor. Because according to everything that I've seen and read, he wasn't up there at the time of the shots. So the rifle was planted. Somebody had to plant it. Could have been Oswald's. For whatever reason. He could have been told, hey, we're going to pop some shots at the president just to scare him. This rifle's going to be found, and maybe he'll do something about Cuba. Who knows? We don't know yet. We don't know the whole story, the true story, and everything but the truth yet. And Frasier doesn't know it either. Hell, even Oswald probably didn't know it. But I guarantee you, if Frasier knew that Oswald took a rifle into that building that day, he damn sure wasn't going to admit to it. Not then, and not now. Now, spoiler alert, folks. I'm about to ruin the big surprise in Frasier's book. Because he adds 2 things in the book that he's never ever said publicly before. So, if you don't want to know what they are, go ahead and turn the show off now. And you can go wait till you're going to read the book or go read the book, go buy it, whatever you want. But I'm about to spoil it, so there's your spoiler alert. So, in the book, at the very end of the book, by the way, well, the written part anyway, we have some Frasier Revelations. So, revelation number 1. Actually, 3. Now, he has stated in the past, after changing his story, that he stood on the steps and he saw Lee Oswald come walking down Houston Street from the rear of the building, cross over Houston, and make a left on Main Street, and he kind of lost him in the crowd after that. This would mean that this event happened rather quickly after the shots. Because according to Frasier, he didn't stand on the steps that long after the assassination. In his book, he tells us that he tried to make his way down Elm Street there and follow Bill Shelley and Bill Lovelady as they were heading for the rail yards. But if Bill Shelley and Billy Lovelady never went to the rail yards that soon after the shots, then that would mean that Frasier didn't go after them and then decide against it when he realized that he wasn't going to catch up to him and there was too much chaos going on for him. And he says he went back inside the building and ate his lunch. So he had to see Oswald leave the building relatively quickly after the events. This would mean if Oswald was prayer man and Bill Shelley and Bill Lovelady were back by the freight elevator when Victoria Adams came down, and that would mean more than likely that either Oswald got out of the building, well, not necessarily. If Marion Baker and Roy Truly saw Oswald on the first floor, because supposedly there was 2 men back by the elevator, according to um, Truly and Baker's testimony. So maybe he was shuttled out the back of the building. Maybe he got out of the back of the building before Shelley and Lovelady came back in. I don't know. I don't know the correct timeline of events here. It's just all crazy. But in his book, Frasier states that after he had made his way down Elm Street a bit to try to catch up with Lovelady and Shelley, and at the point, he said he made it about 20 feet and decided to stop and turn around. At that point, he turned around and started to head back to the building. That he about ran into a fellow who was coming down the side of the school book depository there, making his way to Elm, and that this fella had a rifle in his hand. And that he approached a vehicle parked on Elm Street in front of the school book depository and raised the trunk up and put the rifle in the trunk. And he said that there was a shotgun in the trunk as well. And that he stared this man directly into the eyes and said, "I didn't see nothing, mister." And then walked away back into the book depository. Now, there's a lot of problems with what I just told you. Namely, there's no accounts of any vehicles parked on the Elm Street extension in front of the school book depository or on Elm Street itself in front of the school book depository. This would have been captured on film and photos directly after the assassination, of which we don't see anything like that. I also think that if a guy was hurriedly making his way down the embankment to the left side of the school book depository, holding a rifle, that more people would probably have reported seeing that. You think? I would think. Um, and also, Frazier, why wouldn't you tell anybody about this? I mean, there's your way out of the predicament you're in, buddy. You're getting charged with being an accomplice to murder of the president. Why wouldn't you have said, look, I was on the steps. I started to walk down. I came back, and then I saw this guy with a rifle come down, throw it in the back of a trunk, and get in his car and speed away. I mean, right there is a perfect, you know, way out of the predicament you're in. Now, obviously, they're going to think that this guy was Oswald. But if it wasn't Oswald, then they got a big problem because they have another person that's not Oswald with a rifle running away from the school book depository and making a getaway. By the whole star witness of the show, the guy who brought the other suspect to work that day. It does get a little convoluted at times, but if that's what happened, then you should have been honest at the time and said that that's what happened. So he's been sitting on this story for 58 years. I just don't buy it, folks. You don't have a description of what this guy looks like. You've paid attention to all of the research and everything that's gone on. I'm sure people have showed you photographs of people who may have been associated with, being accused of being shooters. And you've said nothing to anybody for the past 58 years, or even tried to identify this man. You didn't describe him in your book. What was he wearing? What did he look like? Glasses, hair, weight, clothes? What? What? What kind of car did he get into? What kind of rifle was it? Did it have a scope? No. The innocuous explanation for all this is that what he bumped into was a plainclothes policeman, and that these events happened much later than he recalls them happening. Well, I won't say much later, but not within 30 seconds of the assassination. It took a couple minutes for things to start swarming around Dealey Plaza and the grassy knoll and the book depository. But there were many people, many police officers, many plainclothes cops, detectives, sheriffs, who would have parked a car in front of the school book depository, who would have had a shotgun in their trunk as well as a rifle. It could have been just a plainclothes police officer who had been running around trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And, decided there was no immediate danger and I don't need to be running around here with a rifle with all these damn people around here. Let me go put it in my car. Could be as simple and as, you know, innocuous as that. Now, the other revelation that he came up with is the next day after he was arrested and sent home. And this is, of course, before Oswald had been killed. Pardon me. Damn Coke Zero. The next morning, at his sister Lenny Mae Randall's house, he spotted a dark blue car parked just down the street, and a man in the car that had a rifle and seemed to be watching the Randall Frazier household. Now, this spooked old Buell enough to call the Irving PD and let them know what was going on. So he said that they sent a cop car up to this car. Now, he said the cop never got out of the car. He just pulled up next to the car and seemed to be talking to whoever was in the car. And he said that the cruiser pulled off, and then the blue car took off, never to be seen again. He said, but that incident put the fear of God in him, and he realized at that point that the police aren't always on your side, and how easy it was to almost get swept up into something and basically lose your livelihood and your life, your freedom, in an instant for something you didn't do. And he was harassed for years, he says, after the assassination, pulled over all the time. Just about every time he went somewhere, they would pull him over for speeding or pull him over just to, harass him or make his day a little worse. And he lost a lot of respect and trust in the cops over the years. And of course, in his old age, he's regained it now, But so yeah, these two instances that Frasier relates, he realized, he says he realized that, he could be taken out at any time, and he needed to protect his family at all costs. Because they're at his sister's house, with her husband and kids there. He just wanted them to be safe, and he did not want to be the reason that anything bad would happen to them, which I understand. So he kept quiet about these two things for all these years, and then finally came out with it. But I don't know. I just don't know how much I believe him. Don't know. So what's the real truth here, folks? Do we believe Buell? Do we believe his story now? Do you think he's told the whole truth and nothing but the truth? So help him God? Frasier, why didn't you talk about the HSCA, buddy? I would really love to know that. Anyway, folks, that's about it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Merry Christmas. Thank you for listening. Ho, ho, ho. And nothing but good things for the new year. 2021 has sucked ass. Hopefully 2022 will be better. We will just have to see, folks. Peace and love. Nothing but love.